Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, and our friend Paul Carrick Roberts is back with us. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you, Nima.
Let's get started with the phone call between the two presidents, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin. Your take on what has happened, in your opinion, is that going to help the process of negotiations or maybe a Ukrainian settlement?
I don't think so. You see, first of all, I don't think that Trump and his people understand what Putin means when he says we have to solve the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is the absence of the mutual security agreement that Putin has been trying to get from the West for a long time, a number of years. When Putin says the negotiation has to solve the root problem, he means that there has to be a general great power agreement, the sort of thing that he and Lavrov were trying to get the winter before Russia was forced to enter into Ukraine and were refused. So that's what he means. And I think that is his real goal, and that the conflict in Ukraine has been his way of obtaining it. The reason he's so interested in a negotiated agreement, he's hoping that it turns into a great power agreement, a joint mutual understanding, so that all these harassments and sanctions and conflicts can end, and that Russia can proceed assured that there is a general settlement. I don't think Trump understands that, and certainly not Zelensky. And Zelensky has already said that he would not give up any Ukrainian territory. Well, that's saying that he won't agree to any agreement, because it's impossible to have a settlement without Russia having the territories that it has already reincorporated into Russia. So why Trump is proceeding in this way, I don't know. Why he's negotiating with Zelensky, I don't know. We have said before that if Trump wants to end the conflict, all he needs to do is turn off the money and the weapons and go home, and that would end it. Alternatively, he needs to sit down with Putin, decide what the terms are. And for Putin, it means a new Yalta. He wants a new Yalta, a new understanding. And I don't think that's entered Trump's mind. So what do we make of it? Possibly what we see is what we've already suggested, that Trump is looking for an excuse to withdraw from the Ukrainian conflict, to substitute Europe in America's place so Washington can go deal with China. So that, in my view, given the current information we have, is the situation.
Paul, when recently JD Vance he was talking about the way that they see the movement on the part of the Putin administration. And it seems that they're somehow confused. I don't know, it's all about the briefings that they're receiving. Here is what he said. What do you make of it?
Is Vladimir Putin serious about negotiating peace, right? He has made some concessions. He has taken some serious steps in these conversations, but we feel like, we're at a point where we're hitting an impasse, and that's why the president is talking to him on the phone. Yeah, I think honestly that President Putin, he doesn't quite know how to get out of the war. If you think about this, he's got 1 million men under arms. He's re-engineered his entire economy. What used to be manufacturing facilities making products for people to use in their civilian life, they're now making tank shells and artillery shells and drones. And so this is a little bit of guess, but I think the president would agree that part of this is I'm not sure that Vladimir Putin has a strategy himself for how to unwind the war, of course, that's been going on for a few years now. And I think there's also just a little bit of, look, there's fundamental mistrust.
To me, this guy seems so much confused about what Russians want in Ukraine. But when you look at the way that Sergei Lavrov is talking about, you look at Dmitry Peskov is talking about, Vladimir Putin himself was mentioning various times what they want in Ukraine. But it seems, after all, they're not getting there. The administration, the Trump administration, is not getting there.
Well, that's what I said. I don't think the Trump administration or any of the people working on this issue from Washington have much of an idea about what the solution is or what Putin means. The only concession, what concessions has Putin made? He has made none. He's always been in the lead in asking for negotiations. But he always says we have to get to the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is the absence of a great power agreement. And so for Putin, the conflict, if it can be negotiated, it can turn into a great power agreement. And that's what he wants. That's the reason he hasn't quickly won the war, because if he wins the war, he loses the opportunity to turn the negotiation into a great power agreement. Trump shows no indication of that, neither does Vance. And Kellogg and what's the other one, Witkoff or whatever, they all have different solutions. They don't speak the same language or the same terms. And so it's like everyone is trying to kind of offer their approach, but the approaches don't really gel. They don't go together and they don't really lead to a settlement. And I don't think Putin is really interested in a settlement of the war. He's interested in using it for a great power settlement, a great power agreement. I've noticed that he will not agree to a ceasefire before he has the terms of the agreement. So I expect the Russians will continue their slow advance. And before long, all of the disputed territories will be in Russia's hands. At that point, what happens, I don't know. Putin has clearly avoided winning the war. It's clear he's avoided winning because for him, it can be achieved for a much greater purpose, a great power settlement, a new Yalta. And I think that's over the heads of the folks in Washington and in the European Union.
After the phone call, Donald Trump, he posted on his social media, on his page, that the two parties have to talk to each other. They have to negotiate with each other. It seems somehow he's withdrawing from the negotiations. The United States is not part of the negotiations anymore. That is a good sign, or you find it as you mentioned, Donald Trump is not interested in negotiations. He's just prolonging the I don't know, the talks, the situation that they're in Ukraine?
Yeah, I think the intent is to withdraw Washington from the conflict so that Washington can address China. And that is what Wes Mitchell says in the Foreign Affairs article. He says that we view China as the bigger threat. And so we are sequencing our conflicts. We're going to use the negotiations in Ukraine to pull out, to substitute Europe, and we are going to deal with China. So I think that is what's in the works. We've talked about it so many times. It seems totally clear that Trump is not approaching the negotiations in a way that would be successful. He has two surefire ways to go. We've mentioned them many times, and he doesn't use them. So I think that Trump's mind is on China, and it's now on America's Middle Eastern neo-colonial empire. That's what he's after. He says, look, we've destroyed Libya, Syria, Iraq. The Israelis have destroyed Gaza, but they did it with our money and weapons. And so we are now taking Gaza. It's ours. He said that in a White House press conference with Netanyahu. It's going to be ours. And a news person there asked Netanyahu, what do you think about that? Trump's taking Palestine. And Netanyahu says, it sounds like a good idea. So it looks like what Trump has done is there won't be any more greater Israel. There's now going to be the American Middle Eastern colonial empire. And I have seen the information on the two embassies that we have built there, one in Iraq, which is the largest in the world, and we're building one about the same size in Beirut. Well, both of these embassies are far larger than any possible use for them in those countries. And so it's quite clear what they are. They are command and control centers for the American empire. And I think that's what all the negotiations with the Saudis was about. You want to come into our empire as a junior partner? Or do you want us and the Israelis to roll over you? And so I think that's the development. I think this has really taken Trump. It's really, in fact, it may keep him off China. Why else would he say in a joint press conference with Netanyahu that Gaza's ours? We have Gaza. Well, of course, with that comes all of the undersea gas reserves that run from the border of Egypt and Gaza all the way to northern Syria. So there's billions and billions and billions of gas reserves. So that also comes into Trump's hands. So I think that what's really going on is totally different from everything that is discussed. The entire discussion, no matter by who, is incorrect. It's not what they say and discuss. It's not what's going on. We're going to have an American empire in place of Great Israel, and Trump's getting out of this conflict with Russia and Ukraine.
Paul, do you understand? Here is what Scott Bessent said about Russia. I want to know, what do you make of it?
Okay.
To impose sanctions against Russia?
Well, I think we will see what happens when both sides get to the table. President Trump has made it very clear that if President Putin does not negotiate in good faith, that the United States will not hesitate to up the Russia sanctions along with our European partners. What I can tell you is the sanctions were very ineffective during the Biden administration because they kept them low because they were afraid of pushing up domestic oil prices.
Very quickly, how
Do you see the argument that the Biden administration somehow put in the way that they were putting sanctions on Russia were so weak, they're so ineffective? We've heard the same sort of argument on the part of Pete Hegseth, the head of Pentagon, before going to war against Yemen. You remember that? And
Yeah.
this is the same sort of argument, in my opinion. Your take on that?
Well, I think the sanctions have been a great benefit to Russia because it forced them off of the globalist ideology that they swallowed hook, line, and sinker, which were intended to have Russia remain a supplier of raw materials and grains. And it forced Russia into self-development, which is the path they should have been on. But that central bank director they have, she's been a disaster for Russia, and she was consistent with this globalism that Russia remains sort of semi-developed and exports commodities. And so the sanctions have turned Russia into a manufacturing powerhouse, especially of weapons, and the quality of their weapons, which is unrivaled at the present time. So the sanctions have been a benefit, and the threat of sanctions, I don't think means anything any longer to Russia. And I think that the main casualty of the American sanctions will end up being the US dollar, because it will keep the BRICS going. It'll keep going the search for an alternative way of settling international balances. And eventually the use of the dollar will, fade away. And at that time, the United States has a real problem of financing its debt. So the sanctions have mainly done great damage to Europe, especially to Germany. Seriously has hurt the industry. It stopped economic growth all over Europe, and it has called attention to the dollar that is being weaponized and therefore is no longer a reliable means of keeping central bank reserves. So the sanctions have been a disaster for the United States and Europe, and have been a boon, a benefit for Russia.
Paul, do you think that as time goes by, you mentioned that Donald Trump wants to pivot toward China, and we know that Vladimir Putin is doing everything right now to get some sort of Ukrainian settlement, some sort of settlement in Ukraine. But at the same time, how do you see China playing its role, considering the conflict in Ukraine and in the Middle East? Do you see China, the way that they're so smart somehow, that they try to gain some sort of opportunity throughout this sort of chaos that has been built in those regions in Ukraine and in the Middle East? How smart is China, in your opinion, right now, considering what the United States is doing?
That's a good question. I'll answer it. First, though, I want to say that Putin is not really interested in negotiating an end of the war. He has said over and over, if we have to fight this war another 2-3 years, we will. How can he negotiate an end of the war? He's already said what his terms are. All of the disputed territories are his, period. Ukraine cannot be in NATO. And the Ukraine has to be demilitarized and denazified. That's the terms. He's not given up on any of those terms. He's made no compromise on any of those terms. His emphasis on negotiation is, I've already said, it's to use it to get a great power agreement, not to negotiate an end of a conflict that he can end militarily whenever he wants. So with that said, now we go to China. The Chinese, from the interaction I had with them, they look at everybody else as new people who don't understand anything. They've been there 5,000 years. They're patient. They outweigh all their enemies. They just outweigh them. Why have conflict with them? They're all gonna go away anyhow. And the other part of the Chinese strategy is to make deals. They don't approach countries with threats and bribes. They come and say, hey, look, how about this business deal right here? We'll build a port in this city, and then you can export this or that commodity crop out of it, and they approach people in a way that brings them opportunities, which is what now Trump's trying to do in the Middle East. So what it does to us, it causes our influence over these countries to ebb. And countries respond to China. They're not trying to take them over. They're not demanding a military base in the country or an air base. They're just trying to make friends and do business. And this works. And it is working. And the United States wants to stop it. So if Trump can get free of the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East, all the money and effort can be used to try to purchase the governments in Asia. We'll go to Vietnam, to Cambodia, to all of to Thailand, and say, here's a bag full of money. We want you to cooperate with us. Here's another bag full of money. And that, I think, is the way that we're going to approach China. I can't see them trying to start a war. There's no way, as we've talked before, of the United States engaging in a war with China, particularly on its home territory. We have vast supply lines. Our ships are really useless off their coast because of their missiles, the Chinese missiles. Taiwan can't go to war with China. It's a tiny little speck compared to China. So I think it's going to be, instead of having all this focus on what's going on in Ukraine, it's going to be a focus on how do we bribe back Asia and Africa from the Chinese. I think that's what the White House strategy is, and it's what the article by Wes Mitchell supports. That's what he says is the policy. And he says it's the Trump policy. And he's well connected. He's a former member of Trump's Defense Department during Trump's first term. his business partner is the third-ranking person in the Pentagon now. So, and more, it's the policy, it's the office that makes the policy. So I think that, as I've said before, all of the discussion about these issues is wrong. It's all based on false perceptions, false assumptions, and based on narratives that people are advocating or trying to control for reasons that may have nothing to do with the real issue. And so I discount everything all those people say. I don't think any of them are saying anything that's important, and except for Putin, who says we have to deal with the root cause. And the root cause is the absence of a great power agreement. That's what he wants. That's what he's trying to use negotiations for. If he doesn't get it, I suppose he'll stop delaying the military victory and just go ahead and finish the war. The Chinese are not going to attack us, and we would be highly stupid to attack them. A lot of it is just show. It's Trump doing things, but what is he doing? You know, the story changes by the day.
Paul, many people in the United States are arguing Donald Trump before, because Donald Trump is talking about meeting Vladimir Putin, but these people who are pushing not to meet Vladimir Putin because Donald Trump doesn't possess a leverage on Vladimir Putin. Here is what Robert Gates, former defense secretary, said about
Trump not to take that face-to-face, even if Vladimir Putin was willing to do it?
I would say you need to figure out some leverage that you have going into that meeting with Putin. What can you do that puts more pressure to bear on Putin to make him believe his interests are served by not just a ceasefire, but basically at least freezing things in place?
how they're going to gain that sort of leverage that he's talking about?
Well, he can't. But look, the real issue is Gates is assuming there's not to be a negotiating agreement, but we're to use leverage on Putin, make him do what we want. Anytime somebody talks like Gates, there you see American hegemony. We use leverage and we make them do what we want them to do. Well, he's stupid. It's not going to happen. They're not going to make Putin do what they want him to do, whatever that is. And there's not going to be, Putin has no interest in negotiating an end of the war. He's interested in negotiating a great power settlement. Well, that means the United States has to give up its notion of hegemony. It's got to say, well, you know, Putin's right after all. It's no longer a unipolar world. We can't act unilaterally. So we've got to make whatever concessions. The concessions are going to have to come from Washington, not from Moscow. There won't be any concessions from Moscow. They'll have to come from Washington. And the concession will be, hey, we're giving up trying to be the ruler of the world. There are other decision makers. We realize that now we'll work with you. We'll quit trying to impose us on you. It's going to be hard for America to make that decision, because even before the neocons rose up in 1991, we had the liberals for the longest time. They were interventionists. They were international interventionists. It was always America intervening here, intervening. And the whole purpose of it was to get a grip on a country that you could exploit. And that's the history. That's the history. General Smedley Butler, the Marine commander, he said that I and the U.S. Marines were the enforcers for the New York banks and the United Fruit Company. In other words, we're used to exploiting countries, not doing deals with them, exploiting. And that is what is going to have to be compromised away. The Americans are going to have to say, hey, we're one of many countries. There are other big powers. And so we've got to get along. And this is what Putin keeps pushing for, the great power agreement that lets us get along. And I don't think he'll get it because I don't think Washington has the comprehension. I don't just mean Trump. I don't mean anybody there has the comprehension. They're used to being in charge. They don't know how not to be in charge. That's the problem. That's the real problem. It's not how are we going to get leverage. Gates is showing that we're based on force, coercion, leverage. Well, we don't have any on Russia or China. And no possibility of getting any. So it's the Washington mindset that has to change. It doesn't matter what Zelensky says. In fact, what he says is nonsense anyhow. And so I think Putin is overly optimistic about getting a great power agreement because I don't think Washington can think in those terms. It's going to take some defeats, some problems, the dollar in trouble, or something's going to have to happen to make them wake up and realize that they're not in charge.
Paul, the other conflict for Donald Trump is the Iranian nuclear program. And anytime Witkoff is talking about, he's the very envoy of Donald Trump to the conflict, to the negotiations between Iran and the United States. Here is what he said about every time he's changing his rhetoric, the new rhetoric that he's talking about. This is what he said.
Can you give us a sense of what is the outline of the deal that President Trump wants to get with Iran?
Well, the president has been very clear. He wants to solve this this conflict diplomatically and with dialogue. And he's given all the signals. He's directly sent letters to the supreme leader. I have been dispatched to deliver that message as well, and I've delivered it. But on the other hand, we have one very, very clear red line, and that is enrichment. We cannot allow even 1% of an enrichment capability. We've delivered a proposal to the Iranians that we think addresses some of this without disrespecting them. And so that's important. We want to get to a solution here, and we think that we will be able to. But everything begins from our standpoint, John, with a deal that does not include enrichment. We cannot have that because enrichment enables weaponization, and we will not allow a bomb to get here. But short of that, there are all kinds of ways for us to achieve our goals in this negotiation.
Oh, he just another stupid Washington
Yeah.
fool. It didn't
He's,
say.
he's
Blah, 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 blah.
he's just pushing for no enrichment. By the way, on the part of Iranians, the foreign minister of Iran and the supreme leader of Iran said what
Yeah.
he's talking about is just nonsense for us because we don't need any permission to enrich uranium.
Yeah. You
Your
see,
take on why they're doing this? Why are they
look,
doing this right now?
I've already told you again. What he showed us exactly what Gates showed us. We are going to make them do what we want. That's all he said. We decide what Iran can do and can't do. And if they don't agree, we're going to do something bad to them. Well, this is nonsense. The man's a fool. He's an idiot. I think they all are in Washington. They can't think. They think they own the world. And there's not any agreements. They're not negotiating with Iran. They're giving Iran ultimatums, telling them what they have to do. That's not a negotiation. Well, we already agreed that we had an agreement. They can enrich uranium for nuclear power and for medical reasons. For some reason, Trump pulled out of it. So why shouldn't Iran trust the next agreement? The next president will pull out of it. And what is the conflict that fool was talking about? What is the conflict? The conflict is that Iran enriches uranium. Well, why? Well, so does China and Pakistan and India and the United States and France
Brazil.
and Brazil. I mean, what? So why Iran? They might use it against Israel. Well, but Israel enriches uranium. They might use it against Iran. So you see, they talk. That guy, just like Gates, they talk like we're the boss. And we're going to tell them what to do, and they are going to accept it. And that's not negotiation. And so what is the conflict? The conflict we cause by telling Iran you can't enrich uranium. We're the cause of the conflict, not Iran. Well, what if somebody told us we couldn't enrich uranium? I mean, there's some kind of supposition that in Iranian hands, it's far more dangerous. In our hands, we dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, Nima, again, these people, they don't make any sense. I don't think they have any sense. They just are bullies. They think that we have the right to impose our preferences on other countries. And the conflict is because the other countries resist us imposing our policies on them. So we're the cause of the conflict. It's not Iran. What's Iran done? What's it done? Nothing. So, and what's China done? Nothing. And what's Russia done? Nothing. We forced them into going into Ukraine. They didn't want to go in. Putin had done everything he could for 8 years to avoid it. So until the right questions are asked, until the situation is put into the right perspective, all of the discussion is meaningless because it doesn't address any real issue. It's simply an assertion of American hegemony. Well, as long as we are asserting American hegemony, there's going to be conflict because we're the cause of the conflict. Who overthrew the government in Kiev? Washington. That's when that conflict began. It didn't begin by Russia. Russia didn't do anything about it. It sat there and we overthrew a friendly government and stuck in an unfriendly one. So all of this is sort of posed in a false way. And where is the center of the trouble? It all comes from Washington, all of it. And Russia has done nothing. They actually agreed to the breakup of their empire. They lost Belarus, they lost Ukraine, they lost Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkestan, Azerbaijan, Georgia. They gave up their Eastern and Central European empire. They've done anything. Gave it all up. They were looking for peace. And we will never put NATO on your border, but we did. And then we put missiles there. I mean, this conflict entirely originates in Washington. The same, the conflict with China. What's China doing? It let our corporations move there and make things. And they send them back here. They come as imports. It makes the trade deficit bad. It doesn't matter as long as the dollar's the world reserve currency, because the whole world wants our debt. It's the reserves of central banks. So there's no reason for any conflict. So where did this conflict with China come from? What did they do, actually? I can't think of a single thing. Nothing. And what's all the conflict with Iran? It's Israel. Israel wants Iran out because Iran financed the Houthis and the Hezbollah. And so that's the source of that. So these conflicts are not real. They're one-sided. They're one-sided conflicts.
Oh, before wrapping up this session, the final point would be the case of Gaza and the situation in Gaza. Today, we've learned Hamas has published a note that they're saying whatever Netanyahu is saying, they're not letting any truck into the Gaza Strip. They're not providing anything to Gaza. They're starving people there. Here is what Marco Rubio said.
So are you asking Israel to slow down this military push? And the Qatari prime minister told Fox News that there was a deal being put together for all hostages, or many hostages, to be released after Idan Alexander, that American-Israeli, was released recently. But then the Israeli military bombed a hospital, killing 70 civilians, and everything went sideways. Is that your understanding of what happened? It was this lack of care of collateral damage?
No, the way I would characterize it is that this war could end immediately, and Israel's made that clear. It could end immediately if Hamas surrenders and gives up their weapons and demilitarizes and releases all the hostages, including the deceased ones. They did that, this conflict would end. That's been true from the very beginning. It's been true for months now. They're the ones that have chosen not to accept that offer. That said, we continue to work and do everything we can through diplomatic channels and private means to bring about an end to this conflict in a way that ends Hamas and provides the people of Gaza the opportunity at a prosperous and peaceful future. that also ensures Israel's security. So we're working on that. We've never stopped working on that. We've never stopped taking efforts to make that possible, and that continues. Even as I speak to you now, there are people working on that. So we're going to continue to do that, and that's the outcome we want to see. And hopefully the sooner.
Nothing, just the same thing. He's just suggesting the same thing that he has been doing for many months.
Well, look, it's the same, just like the last two. He's saying Hamas can end the conflict by surrendering. In other words, what's the negotiation? There's no negotiation. And the determination is that Gaza is eliminated, gone. He didn't say anything about the security of Palestinians or the security of people in Gaza. It's, oh, the security of Israel. Well, it's Israel that's destroyed Gaza, not Gaza that's destroyed Israel. So why is the only attention on Israel's security? What about Gaza's security? What about the Palestinian security? They don't have any. They haven't had any for the longest time. And Rubio is quite content for this to continue until there aren't any Palestinians. You can't get any food in, any medicine in, any water in. You can't get anything in. So the people are assigned to death if they're going to die. That's the intent. And Trump's at home with this. He would prefer that Jordan and Egypt would take them in, and he probably will offer money that they take them in. But it looks like Trump's just as happy if they're all killed and they're out of the way. And then all the rubble that Israel has turned Gaza into can be pushed away, got rid of, and they'll build a resort. This sort of view is there are only two interests in the world, Israel's and America's. No other interests count. No one else has a voice or should be given any consideration. Look, how long has this genocide been going on? And it's gone on with the full support of the United States. The money, the bombs, the diplomatic cover. Nobody's done anything about it except South Africa. They got Netanyahu indicted in a court that has no enforcement capability. No one's done anything about it. So you got two interests, Israel's, America's. No other interests count. Everybody else is told by us what's going to happen to them if they don't do what we tell them. And that's what those last three people showed. Rubio, I forget who the middle guy was, and then Gates.
Witkoff.
Witkoff. They were showing that, look, we're mafia captains, and the news for you is to pay up right now, or we're going to break all your windows and your legs too. This is the approach. They all three showed that. Nobody showed the slightest bit of interest in what the other side's position was, or what might be unjust about what we're trying to force them to do, or unrealistic about what we're trying to force them to do. And so we can see that the American hegemony remains the policy. Well, if you think that you have a right to hegemony over the world and you behave in that way, there's endless conflicts. And the source of the conflict is not Iran. It's not Gaza or Palestine or Hamas. It's not China and it's not Russia. The source of the conflict is the United States and Israel. And I mean, there are some little conflicts that don't really make much sense, like China and India. What in the hell is all that about? India and Pakistan. What is it makes these things don't make any sense. So why? What for? What are they? It makes you think somebody's working under the covers to cause these conflicts, which have no sensible purpose. There's no, you know, China and India fighting over a few kilometers somewhere in mountains that nobody can live in. What does it make no sense? And India and Pakistan, I mean, what for? They both got nuclear weapons and they're having a conflict. Isn't that more dangerous than Iran enriching uranium?
Yeah.
But who gets the attention? Oh, Iran, they enriching uranium. Well, no. Why shouldn't Iran have the capability to produce its own medical technology or its own nuclear power? At some point, everybody says the oil runs out. And so it makes sense even for an oil country to have alternatives. And atomic energy is one of the alternatives. I don't favor it, of course, but it's not a business for us to decide what Iran can do. We could, instead of making threats, we could try to give them some kind of reassurances. We could say, we'll extend our security umbrella to you. There are sensible ways to approach things, but it's always do what we say or else. That's what all those policymakers were saying. They were saying, do what we say or else. There's no consideration for the person we're talking, the country we're talking to.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
It's always a pleasure, Nima. Thank you.
Take care, Paul.
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.